Dad praised my brother for being self-made until I cut off his $6,000 lifeline. Family dinners in my house always feel like stage plays. My mom sends the group text days in advance, full of chirpy demands, disguised as invitations, full attendance. No excuses. My dad plays the role of stoic patriarch. And Jason, my younger brother, always arrives fashionably late, hoodie draped over him, like armor foam glued to his palm. I knew walking in that night, it wouldn't be different. But I didn't know it would end with the myth of my family shattering in front of everyone. The table was crowded. My parents, Aunt Cheryl, myself, and finally Jason the golden boy. Mom practically glowed when he walked in. Aunt Cheryl laughed too loudly at his jokes even though he barely made eye contact. Dad cleared his throat like a conductor silencing the room, then raised his glass. To Jason, he declared pride dripping from every word. The perfect example of grit and determination. He's shown us all what success looks like when you don't take handouts. Glasses clinked. Aunt Cheryl lifted hers like it was communion. Jason smirked, basking in the applause. I sat frozen wine glass untouched. The words rang in my head, no handouts. It wasn't the first time I'd swallowed that line, letting it scrape against the truth lodged in my throat. For 3 years, I've been the handout. Tuition transfers every semester. Rent auto-pay from my account. Car insurance covered without question. The MacBook I replaced after his broke right before finals. Not to mention the late-night Venmo requests he sent with captions like emergency that always turned out to be beer or sneakers. I could feel my pulse pounding. And then without rehearsing, without planning, I spoke. Then he'll be fine without the $6,000 I transfer toward his tuition every semester. The room froze. Jason's glass halted halfway to his mouth. Mom blinked like she'd swallowed a nail. Aunt Cheryl's smile collapsed. I didn't stop. The silence gave me courage. And the car insurance I've been covering since sophomore year, I added, my voice steady. The MacBook I bought when his crashed. The rent I've been paying for that apartment he loves posting about. All of it. I finally raised my glass, not to toast, but to punctuate. No handouts, right? Jason's face drained. For the first time, I saw the boy underneath the smug grin, uncertain, exposed. Dad blinked, lips tightening, like he was calculating how much truth had just detonated in his perfect toast. Jason opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Mom tried to recover, plastering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sweetheart, maybe we don't need to air all this tonight, I cut her off. Why not? Isn't this the perfect time? Isn't this where we applaud success built on nothing but hard work? The words hung heavy. No one touched their food. Aunt Cheryl fiddled with her napkin, desperate to vanish. Jason sat rigid, his hand still hovering near his untouched glass. Inside, I felt a strange mixed anger, yes, but also relief. Years of silence, of enabling, cracked wide open in one toast. Dinner limped on after that, but the performance was over. No one asked about my promotion, the house I just bought, or the team I now led at work. All eyes stayed on Jason as though waiting for him to recover his mask. He didn't. When dessert came, I excused myself. Thanks for dinner, Mom. My voice was calm, but my heart hammered. I grabbed my jacket and left. At home, I opened my laptop. With a few clicks, I stopped the tuition transfers, canceled the rent autopay, removed Jason from my car insurance policy. The screen glowed back at me quiet and final. No angry text came that night. None the next day either. But I knew they would. Because Jason wasn't self-made. He was me-made. And the moment I stepped out of the picture, the whole illusion would start to crack. And this was only the beginning. The silence lasted 3 weeks. No texts, no calls. No sly Venmo requests from Jason at midnight. Even my mom's passive-aggressive hope. Your well messages vanished. It was the kind of quiet that should have felt peaceful, but instead it buzzed in my chest like a storm gathering beyond the horizon. At first, I enjoyed it. I went to work without checking my bank account for mystery withdrawals. I hit the gym. Took a weekend trip to Seattle, booked a hotel with my own money for myself, not for anyone else. For the first time in years, I wasn't living as a secret sponsor of someone else's life. Then the cracks began. The first arrived in the form of an email. Subject line urgent, tuition payment overdue. Jason's student account flagged balance past due, immediate payment required to avoid withdrawal. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Then I closed the tab. I had been the invisible scaffolding holding up his college career. Without me, the structure was crumbling exactly as it should. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Jason. Can we talk? That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a lazy line tossed out like a fishing hook, waiting to see if I'd bite. I didn't. A week later, Mom called. Her voicemail was chirpy, painfully fake. Hi, sweetheart. Just thinking maybe we could all catch up this week. Jason's having a little hiccup with some school payments. I think he just needs someone to talk to. You know how he looks up to you? Right? I laughed bitterly when I heard it. Looked up to me. Jason had spent his whole life looking past me, stepping on me when it suited him. And now suddenly, I was supposed to be his role model. I texted back one line, not my responsibility anymore. The following morning, Dad tried calling. I let it ring out. When he tried again that evening, I answered. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted to hear just how far they were willing to bend reality before it snapped. His tone was sharp, all business. Your brother's in a tough spot. His classes are at risk. You have the means to help, and you're just watching it happen. No, I said. Calm, clear. I helped him graduate high school. I helped him get into college. I paid his rent, tuition, insurance. I bought his laptop. I've done more than either of you ever did. And I didn't get a single toast for it. There was a pause. I could almost hear him recalculating. Then the fallback line, he's family. So am I snapped back. And I'm tired of being treated like the backup parent with a credit card. The line went quiet before Dad muttered something about disrespect and hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand. For once, the guilt didn't come. It was replaced by something steadier resolve. Days later, the knock at my door came. I peered through the peephole. Jason, no car in the driveway. Hoodie up, hands jammed into his pockets. He must have taken the bus. He knocked again, waited, looked down at his phone, then back at the door. He didn't look angry. He looked empty, like someone who had just realized the ground beneath them was gone. I didn't open the door. After a minute, he turned and left, walking down the hall. With his head low, the swagger drained out of him. I watched until he disappeared, my heart thudding with both guilt and grim satisfaction. 2 weeks later, the inevitable email arrived. Jason had officially withdrawn from the university. Couldn't pay tuition, couldn't keep his apartment. He pawned the laptop I bought him, sold off sneakers, then finally retreated to the only place left, my parents' basement. And that's when the mythology began to collapse. At first, they tried their old tricks, calling it a gap semester, telling relatives Jason was reevaluating priorities. But whispers travel faster than spin. Aunt Cheryl called one night, her voice dripping with concern. Honey, I'm worried about your parents. Jason's been sleeping till noon, playing video games, saying he's job searching, but never leaves the basement. They look exhausted. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence. For years, I'd been absorbing that exhaustion, shielding them from the real Jason. Now they were face to face with the son they'd polished into a false idol. And reality was uglier than any toast could disguise. Jason's downfall wasn't dramatic at first. It was slow, pathetic, almost boring. But that's the thing about collapse, it rarely comes with fireworks. More often, it's the quiet decay, the steady erosion of everything propping someone up, until one day the floor gives way. Once he moved back in with our parents, I started hearing pieces of the story through secondhand channels. Not from Jason, directly, he was too proud for that, but from Mom's desperate attempts to smooth things over. Her texts came like clockwork. Jason's just taking some time to regroup. He's adjusting to being home again. You know how stressful college can be. Regroup, adjust, stress. The euphemisms piled up like sandbags against a flood, but the water kept rising. Aunt Cheryl was less delicate. She called me late one night, her voice tired but sharp. Your brother's wasting away down there. Sleeps until noon. Claims he's applying to jobs, but all I see is him glued to a controller. Your parents are walking on eggshells around him. I thanked her, but inside, I felt the bitter twist of validation. This was the real Jason. The Jason I'd been carrying for years. The Jason they refused to see. The myth of the self-made golden child was unraveling in real time. And for the first time, it wasn't me holding the mirror. Then Dad called. His voice was tighter this time, stripped of the bluster from our last conversation. Things aren't going well, he admitted. Jason maxed out his last credit card. I've been covering the payments, but I'm already behind. He says he's applying to jobs, but nothing's happening. I stayed silent, letting him stew in the discomfort. Finally, he dropped the ask careful and indirect. We're under a lot of pressure. Groceries bills piling up. Jason just needs a little boost to get back on his feet. I almost laughed. A little boost? 3 years of tuition, rent, insurance gadgets, that wasn't a boost. That was life support. So I asked one simple question. Is he still using the laptop I bought him? The silence stretched. Then Dad muttered, no, he sold it. For rent, I think. No, I corrected sharply. He sold it to avoid working. That shut him up. I ended the call with one final line. I'm not helping anymore. Not with him, not with you. The quiet after that was heavy, but it was honest. A week later, I got another call, this time from Mom. Her voice was shaky, her energy drained. He's angry, she confessed. Yelling over dinner, fighting about Wi-Fi speeds, blaming everyone but himself. Your father and I are exhausted. I don't know what we did wrong. I wanted to scream, what you did wrong. You built him into a god and offered him worship while I worked quietly in the shadows. You handed him applause while I handed him rent money. You called him self-made while I made him. Instead, I stayed calm. You're finally seeing who he is, I said. Not who you wanted him to be. Her silence was answer enough. 2 weeks later, the situation had deteriorated. Jason applied for a part-time job at a pizza place. Didn't get it. No experience, apparently. He came home sulking, ranting about how the system was stacked against him, how the economy was broken. At one point, Mom texted me that Jason said I abandoned him when he needed me most. I didn't respond, because the truth was I hadn't abandoned him. I had abandoned the fantasy that he could live forever without consequences. And now the crash was his alone to absorb. One night, Cheryl called again. Your parents look defeated. It's like the light went out of them. Jason's not the only one cracking. Your mom barely leaves her room. Your dad's working overtime just to keep the lights on. They're finally seeing it, but it might be too late. I lay awake after that, staring at the ceiling. For years, I had been the buffer, the one who absorbed Jason's failures before they ever touched them. Now that buffer was gone, and the raw impact was hitting them like a wrecking ball. Ask yourself, what would you do if your family built a shrine to someone else and used your blood, sweat, and money as the foundation? Would you keep carrying the weight, or would you step aside and let the idol topple on its own? Jason was cracking. My parents were cracking. And for the first time, I felt something dangerous stirring inside me. Not guilt, not pity, but a cold, quiet satisfaction. Jason's spiral had reached a new low when the call came not from him, not from my parents, but from an old colleague of mine, Jake. He used to sit 3 desks down from me in our first office job, the kind where we all worked long hours, fueled by bad coffee and ambition. Now, he ran a growing tech firm and needed reliable people for entry-level support. Nothing glamorous, he said, but it's stable. Decent pay. Benefits. Someone willing to show up and learn could build a career here. I almost said no. Almost told him I didn't know anyone. But then I thought of Jason broke sulking blaming the world from our parents' basement. Maybe what he needed wasn't applause or another handout. Maybe he needed reality cold and unfiltered. So I told Jake, maybe I do know someone. I didn't call Jason, I called Mom. Her voice cracked when I explained. It's a full-time role. On site, he'll have to show up every day, wear clean clothes, follow instructions. This is his shot to prove he can stand on his own. There was a pause, then a shaky Andrew. Thank you. He's just stuck. He needs this. An hour later, my phone lit up. Jason, what's this job thing? His tone was already defensive. It's an entry-level support position. Real work, real pay. A chance to get your life back on track. There was a scoff. You think I need you to save me again? You think I'm some charity case? No, I said evenly. I think you need to save yourself. I'm just holding out a mirror. A mirror? He spat. Yeah. You can keep pretending everyone owes you, or you can face the reflection of what you've become. The choice is yours. He went off, then ranting about how the job was beneath him, how he deserved more, how I was just trying to make myself look good. I let him rant. When he finally stopped, I said one last thing. If you're too proud to work, don't call it an opportunity. Call it a test, and see if you pass. Then I hung up. 2 hours later, Mom texted me. We told him to take it. Your father agrees. We're done babying him. For the first time, something shifted. They weren't protecting him anymore. They weren't spinning excuses. They were tired. The next day, Jason showed up to the interview. Jake called me afterward. He's rough around the edges, arrogant, guarded, but he's smart. I'll give him a shot. And just like that, Jason had a job. 9 to 5, tech support, commute downtown clock, and answer to a manager. Real responsibility. I didn't congratulate him. I didn't pat him on the back. Because this wasn't a gift. This wasn't another bailout. This was a mirror. And I wanted to see what he'd do when faced with it. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd surprise me. That he'd grit his teeth, swallow his pride, and grow up. But deep down, I knew Jason wasn't built for responsibility. He was built for applause. Jake texted me at the end of the second week. He shows up, doesn't talk to anyone, always on his phone. Looks annoyed half the time. By the 4th week, Jake stopped updating me. Silence can be louder than complaints. Then came week 6, a Thursday afternoon. My phone buzzed with one final message from Jake. He quit today, walked out, left his badge, said the job was draining and he had better things to do. I stared at the screen for a long time. 6 weeks. That was all he could endure when no one clapped for him just for existing. The next day, Mom called. Her voice was heavy, like she hadn't slept in days. He quit. Just came home in the middle of the day, no warning. Your father and I don't know what to do anymore. I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Jason had been given a mirror, and instead of facing his reflection, he smashed it and walked away. Ask yourself what happens when the golden child fails. Not because the world is cruel, but because the pedestal was built on sand. For Jason, the test was over. And he had failed spectacularly. Jason's resignation didn't just slam a door on his job. It cracked open the myth my parents had been protecting for years, the one where their youngest son was a prodigy, a self-made man destined for greatness. When Jake texted me that Jason had walked out mid-shift, leaving his badge behind like it was a prison shackle, I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because the truth was loud enough without me adding a single word. That night, my mom called. Her voice carried the weight of years of denial finally catching up to her. Andrew, he quit. Just came home in the middle of the day. No call, no notice. Just done. I could hear Jason in the background pacing, muttering about how the job was toxic and beneath him. My father's tone, sharp and tired, cut through. You lasted 6 weeks, Jason. 6 weeks. What are we supposed to tell people now? For once, my parents weren't cushioning him with excuses. There was no spin, no carefully crafted narrative about mental health breaks or reevaluating priorities. Only raw exhaustion. I stayed quiet. Let them talk. Because silence, I'd learned, was sharper than any lecture. Over the next week, the calls kept coming. Not from Jason. He wouldn't lower himself to admit failure, but from my parents. My dad's voice was clipped, controlled. He's moody. Snaps at us. Sleeps half the day. Won't look for another job. Andrew, we can't keep living like this. My mom's messages were softer, almost pleading. Maybe he just needs more time. Maybe the job wasn't a good fit. You know how sensitive he is. But beneath her words, I could hear it. The tremor of someone who had finally run out of lies to tell herself. The illusion was shattering piece by piece. At dinner one evening, my father finally snapped. Jason had been glued to his phone all day, refusing to help with chores, complaining about Wi-Fi speeds. When Dad told him to pick up his plate, Jason sneered. That's not my job. And just like that, decades of bottled-up frustration erupted. Not your job. Your job was to finish school. Your job was to hold on to the opportunity your brother handed you on a silver platter. Your job was to grow up, and you failed every single one. Mom told me about it later in a hushed voice, as if confessing a sin. Your father has never yelled at him like that. Jason stormed out, said we were ungrateful that we didn't support him. But Andrew, for the first time, I think your father finally sees it. I leaned back in my chair, phone pressed to my ear, and let the words sink in. My father, the man who once toasted Jason's self-made success in front of the whole family, was finally acknowledging the truth. Jason wasn't self-made. He was me-made. And now with me gone, he was nothing but a hollow shell of entitlement. It didn't stop there. Within days, my parents issued an ultimatum. 30 days. That's how long Jason had to find a job or move out. No more excuses. No more support disguised as servitude. Jason didn't take it well. He raged. He slammed doors. He shouted that we had abandoned him, that I had poisoned everyone against him. He accused my parents of betrayal, said they were choosing me over him. In reality, they were just choosing truth over delusion. For years, they had treated me like the background character in Jason's hero story, the accountant who quietly paid the bills, while the golden child basked in applause. Now they were seeing what I had always known: the hero's crown was paper thin. I wish I could say I felt vindicated, that I cheered when the curtain finally fell. But the truth, I just felt tired. Tired in the way you feel when you've been warning about a storm for years and only get blamed when the flood finally arrives. Ask yourself, what's worse, being the forgotten sibling who carried the weight, or being the golden child who never learns to walk without crutches? Jason's downfall wasn't a spectacle I celebrated. It was a slow, inevitable unraveling that everyone but him had seen coming. And now, with the illusion shattered, the real test was about to begin. Not for Jason, he had already failed his. But for my parents? Would they finally face the son they had created? Or would they try once again to rebuild the myth from broken pieces? I had my suspicions. The night my parents gave Jason 30 days to shape up or get out, the house erupted like a pressure cooker finally blowing its lid. My father's voice was the first to cut through, sharp, tired, and laced with finality. You have a month, Jason, 30 days. Either you get a job and start paying your way, or you leave this house. Jason laughed at first like it was a bluff. You're not serious? I'm your son. You wouldn't throw me out. But my dad didn't flinch. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on Jason's. We've coddled you long enough. You're not a boy anymore. You're a grown man acting like a spoiled child. This is over. My mother stayed quiet, her hands twisting the napkin in her lap, but I could see it in her face. This wasn't just Dad's ultimatum. She was behind it too. For once, they were united against him. Jason slammed his hand on the table so hard the silverware rattled. You're choosing Andrew over me. He poisoned you against me, and now you're taking his side. You've always loved him more. The irony nearly made me choke. Love me more. For years, I'd been invisible at that table while Jason soaked up praise I'd paid for. Now that the illusion had collapsed, he was scrambling for excuses. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Jason stood pacing like a caged animal. Fine, I'll get a job. But it won't be some pathetic 9 to 5. I deserve better than that. Dad's reply was ice cold. You deserve what you earn. Nothing more. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that makes every breath feel loud. Jason's bravado cracked for just a moment, and I saw what he was, without the applause, scared, cornered, small. Over the next week, the house turned into a battleground. Jason slept late, stormed around, muttering about how unfair it all was, applied half-heartedly to jobs he considered beneath him. Pizza delivery, warehouse work, retail. Every offer was an insult in his eyes. At night, he'd corner Mom in the kitchen trying to wear her down. You can't really let Dad do this. You won't let me end up on the street, will you? And sometimes, just sometimes, I could hear her waver. But then she'd remember that night in my living room. The way Amos's shivering body, no wrong story, scratch that, sorry. Back to Jason's arc. The way Jason had screamed at them when his paycheck fell through. She remembered the shame of defending him at Thanksgiving dinners, pretending he was thriving, when the truth was a ticking time bomb, and she'd steel herself again. Jason, enough. You're out of chances? The days ticked down. 25, 20, 15, each one a drumbeat Jason couldn't ignore, no matter how loudly he pretended otherwise. One night, Dad called me. He's panicking, he said flatly. Finally, realizing we mean it. Good, I replied. About time he faces reality. Dad hesitated, then admitted something I never thought I'd hear. We should have done this years ago. You warned us. We didn't listen. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was the closest I'd ever get. By the final week, Jason was desperate. He stomped around with crumpled job applications, blaming everyone but himself. The market's trash. Employers are biased. Nobody appreciates talent anymore. Talent. That word hung in the air like a bad joke. The night before his 30 days were up, I got a text from Mom. He's packing. I think he's really leaving. I sat there staring at the message, a swirl of emotions tightening in my chest. Relief. Sadness. A quiet, bitter kind of justice. Jason had always been the golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. And now here he was, backpack stuffed with clothes, eyes darting between anger and fear, facing the door, not as a prodigy, but as a man who had finally run out of borrowed time. Where will you go? Mom asked him softly, her voice breaking. Jason didn't answer. He just hoisted the bag onto his shoulder and muttered, anywhere but here. And with that, the door closed behind him. For the first time in years, my parents' house was quiet. No drama, no excuses, no golden child shining over everyone else. Just silence. But silence, I realized, can be louder than applause. Jason lasted exactly 3 nights on his own before reality began gnawing at him. At first, he tried to project confidence. He posted filtered selfies on Instagram captioned, "New chapter, watch me rise." He wanted everyone to think leaving the house was his decision, not the fallout of an ultimatum. But behind the glossy pictures was a rented couch in a friend's cramped apartment. Rent wasn't free. Neither was food. And for the first time in his life, Jason had no one to swipe a card for him. By day 5, my mother texted me. He called. He's already asking for money. We told him no. That shocked me more than Jason's plea itself. My parents, who had once bailed him out of everything from parking tickets to luxury vacations, had finally closed the tap. I could almost hear the gears grinding in Jason's head as he realized his usual tricks weren't working anymore. He tried to hustle half-heartedly. He signed up for a gig app, delivering groceries in a beat-up borrowed car. He posted motivational quotes about grinding and resilience, trying to mask the fact that he couldn't even afford gas. 2 weeks and Aunt Cheryl called me. "He showed up at my house last night," she whispered, voice low, like Jason was still on her porch. "Wanted to crash here." I told him no. He looked lost, like a kid who'd forgotten how to walk without someone holding his hand. I pictured him, then hoodie pulled tight sneakers, scuffed that old arrogance, slipping like a mask too heavy to wear. Jason called me the next day. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was shaking, a mix of anger and begging. "Andrew, come on, man. This is messed up. You made your point. You proved whatever you wanted to prove. Can't you help me out just a little?" I didn't call back. 3 weeks out, the Instagram post stopped. The silence on his feed spoke louder than any caption could. Rumors trickled through family circles he'd been rejected from multiple jobs, turned down for loans, even pawned a watch Dad had given him for graduation. By the end of the month, he showed up at our parents' house again. This time, he wasn't swaggering in as the prodigal son. He was dragging himself back like a soldier defeated by a war he never prepared for. Mom told me the scene in detail later. He dropped his bag in the hallway, collapsed onto the couch, and muttered, "I can't do it." Dad stood over him, arms crossed. "You can't do what? Live like this?" Jason mumbled. "Work crappy jobs, scrape for rent, eat ramen every night. I'm not built for that." Dad's reply was brutal, but necessary. "Then you're not built for life. Because that's what it is when you've spent years living off other people's effort." Jason cried that night. The golden child, the untouchable favorite, finally broke down like a child who'd lost his safety blanket. And here's the strange part. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt a hollow kind of sadness, because behind all the arrogance and entitlement, Jason was just a man who had never been forced to grow up. And maybe that was our parents' fault. Maybe it was mine too, for enabling him so long. The next week, something shifted. Dad didn't cave, Mom didn't shield. Instead, they laid out new rules. Jason would contribute rent to stay under their roof. He would get a job, any job, and keep it. He would pay his own bills. "No exceptions," Dad said. "You live here, you live like an adult." Jason argued, of course. Through tantrums, claimed the jobs available were beneath him. But this time, no one rescued him. Within days, he landed a part-time gig at a hardware store. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with applause, but it came with a paycheck. I didn't congratulate him. I didn't send encouragement. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about him deciding whether he wanted to keep drowning or finally learn to swim. Weeks later, Aunt Cheryl called again. "You'd be proud," she said softly. I saw Jason stocking shelves. He looked tired, but real, like he's finally starting to live in the same world as the rest of us. For the first time in years, I felt something flicker. Not hope exactly, but maybe the faint outline of it. Because sometimes, rock bottom isn't a punishment. It's a foundation. Family dinners used to feel like stage plays. Every seat, a role, every smile rehearsed. My parents would beam at Jason the golden child, while I sat in the wings, like crew backstage, indispensable but invisible. This time, though, the illusion faltered. It was Sunday night. My parents insisted on hosting dinner, a tradition they clung to even when it felt more like a performance than a meal. But when I walked into their house, I noticed something different. No polished silverware. No expensive wine set out as a centerpiece. Just plain plate spaghetti and a tired air of resignation. Jason was already at the table, shoulders slouched, wearing a faded hardware store uniform. He didn't look like the invincible younger brother they once idolized. He looked like a man stripped of his armor, exposed in a way none of us could ignore. Andrew, Dad greeted, trying for his usual tone of authority, but his voice cracked. He gestured to the chair beside Jason. "Sit." I did, and for a long moment, silence filled the room. Forks scraped plates. No one wanted to speak the truth aloud. Finally, Mom broke it. "Jason started his job this week," she said, her tone strained, like she was still trying to spin it into something worth applauding. "We're proud of him for making the effort." Jason didn't look proud. He stabbed at his spaghetti, muttering, "It's just temporary. I'll find something better soon." But Dad didn't jump in to defend him this time. Instead, he said flatly, "Better doesn't come without proving yourself first." The silence after that was heavy, like the walls themselves were listening. For years, my parents had protected Jason's image at all costs. Even when his grades slipped, they said he was gifted in other ways. When he blew through money, they said he was investing in his future. When he coasted, they called it waiting for the right opportunity. But now sitting at that table, there was no spin left. Just the reality of a grown man working part-time retail and living off the grace of two parents who finally looked too tired to keep pretending. Jason must have felt the shift too. He glared at me, suddenly eyes sharp, voice rising. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? To see me humiliated? To drag me down to your level?" I didn't flinch. No, Jason. This is what happens when reality finally catches up. You're not dragged down, you're just where the rest of us have been all along. Mom gasped softly, but she didn't correct me. She didn't rush to Jason's defense like she once would have. Dad leaned back, arms crossed, eyes locked on Jason. Your brother's right. This isn't about humiliation. It's about facing the life you've avoided for years. Jason's fork clattered against his plate. He looked at them, at me, then down at his food. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. That's when I realized the illusion wasn't just cracking for them. It was cracking for him, too. He had spent years believing he was exceptional, destined for easy success, shielded from consequences. But illusions only last as long as the people around you keep feeding them. And my parents, worn down and stripped of denial, weren't feeding it anymore. After dinner, Dad asked me to stay back, while Jason retreated to his old room upstairs. Mom busied herself with dishes, but her silence was loud, like she was bracing herself. I owe you an apology, Dad said, voice low. We built Jason up into something he wasn't. We let him believe effort was optional, and we leaned on you to keep it all afloat. I waited, unsure whether to accept it or let him keep unraveling. He sighed. I used to think I was protecting him, that if I kept telling him he was special, life would bend to fit the story. But life doesn't bend. And now, his shoulders slumped. Now I see what I've done. To him, to you. It was strange hearing my father admit weakness. Strange, but not unwelcome. You still have time, I said quietly. Jason does too, but only if you stop protecting him from the lessons he needs. For once, Dad didn't argue. He just nodded, a broken man trying to rebuild himself piece by piece. Driving home that night, I kept replaying the dinner in my head. The look in Jason's eyes when he realized the applause was gone. The weariness in my parents' faces when they stopped pretending. The silence in the house where denial used to live. The cracks in the illusion weren't just fractures anymore. They were widening into chasms. And once the facade finally collapsed, none of us would ever see Jason or ourselves the same way again. It happened on a Thursday night. The call came from Mom, her voice tight, urgent. Andrew, you need to come over. Jason, he's losing it. I hesitated. For months I had promised myself I wouldn't rush to clean up their messes anymore. But something in her tone told me this wasn't about bills or jobs. It was about a family reaching its breaking point. When I arrived, the house was loud with chaos. Jason's voice thundered from the living room, furious, defiant. I'm not paying rent. I'm your son, not your tenant. Dad's reply was colder than I'd ever heard. Then you can leave. This isn't a free ride anymore. I stepped inside to see Jason pacing like a caged animal, fists clenched, eyes wild. He looked less like the golden child and more like a man cornered by the truth he couldn't outrun. You, he spat when he saw me. This is all your fault. You poisoned them against me. You've been waiting years for this, haven't you, to see me fall? I met his glare calmly. No, Jason. I've been waiting years for you to stand. For a moment, the room went still. Mom wrung her hands, torn between stepping in and staying silent. Dad stood firm, jaw set, like a man who finally understood the cost of enabling. Jason's voice cracked. You don't get it? I can't live like this? Working some dead-end job, being treated like nothing? I'm supposed to be more. I'm meant for better. His words hit me like deja vu, because I'd heard them before in different forms, from people drowning in debt at my job, from clients who thought entitlement could bend reality. They all said the same thing: I'm different. I deserve more. But the world doesn't negotiate with illusions. You're not meant for better, I told him softly. You're meant for what you build. And right now, you've built nothing. He lunged toward me, then not with fists, but with a storm of words. Easy for you to say, you had it all figured out. You had disciplined jobs, success. Everyone compared me to you. Do you know what that feels like? To always be the disappointment while you got praised for being the responsible one? It was the closest thing to honesty I'd ever heard from him. Yes, I said simply. Because while you thought I was being praised, I was being used. You got the spotlight. I got the bill. Neither of us had it easy. Jason, we were just trapped in different cages. Something in his eyes flickered. Then anger tangled with recognition. But pride is stubborn. He turned back to our parents. If you let me crash here, no rent, no stupid rules. I'll get back on my feet. I just need time. Dad shook his head. No more time. You've had years. If you want to stay here, you follow the rules. Otherwise, you leave. The air felt like glass ready to shatter. Jason waited, expecting Mom to intervene. She always had before, but this time she didn't. Her voice trembled, but her words held firm. Your father's right. We can't do this anymore. You're not a child. If you want to live like an adult, prove it. Jason's face collapsed. For the first time, he realized no one was going to rescue him. Not me, not them. The net was gone. He stormed upstairs, slammed the door. The house shook with the sound. Hours later, after the silence settled, Mom whispered, "Did we do the right thing?" I looked at her, this woman who had defended him through every failure, who had turned my sacrifices invisible for years, and I saw the weight of guilt finally pressing down. Yes, I said, because for the first time, you didn't protect the illusion. You protected the truth. That night, lying in my own bed, I kept replaying Jason's words, I'm meant for better. Maybe he truly believed it. Maybe he always would. But belief without effort is just fantasy. And now, for the first time in his life, fantasy wasn't enough. The days after the standoff felt different. The air in my parents' house was no longer thick with denial. For the first time in years, they weren't shielding Jason from consequences. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't being dragged in as the silent safety net. Jason stayed locked in his old room for 2 days straight. No job hunting, no conversations, just silence and the occasional thud of footsteps pacing across the ceiling. My parents didn't knock. They didn't beg him to come down. They let him sit in the mess of his own making. On the third day, Dad called me. His voice was steady, almost relieved. "He's packing," he said. "Where's he going?" I asked. "I don't know. Friend's couch, maybe?" But he knows the rules now. He won't get a free ride here anymore. I didn't reply right away. Part of me expected guilt to creep in, the old reflex that made me want to rescue him. But it didn't. Instead, I felt something I hadn't in years: clarity. That night, Jason showed up at my door. Not yelling, not demanding, just standing there with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a look I couldn't read. "I just need a place to crash. A week, maybe 2. His voice was low, almost humble, but the undertone of expectation was still there, like he assumed I'd fold. I opened the door wider, let him in, and we sat in my living room. He didn't look like the golden child anymore. He looked like someone stripped bare, stripped down to his last excuse. "Jason," I said quietly, "you can stay here tonight, but that's it. Tomorrow you need to figure something out. A job, a plan, something real. I won't be another parent. I won't bankroll your excuses. You either start building your own life, or you'll keep watching it fall apart." His jaw clenched. "You don't get it. You've always had it together. You don't know what it's like to feel less." I shook my head. "I do. You just never saw it. While you were being called special, I was being called responsible. While you got applause, I got silence. But responsibility without recognition still builds something. Entitlement without effort builds nothing." For once, he didn't argue. He just sat there staring at the floor. The next morning, he was gone. A note left on the counter. "Thanks for the couch. I'll figure it out." Weeks passed. I heard bits and pieces through my parents. Jason had bounced between friends' apartments, picked up odd jobs, struggled. There was no overnight transformation, no sudden rise to greatness. Just the slow grinding reality of adulthood finally pressing against him. One evening, Mom called. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Andrew, we're sorry. For everything. For the years we made you invisible. For letting Jason live in a world we built out of lies. We see it now. And we're done protecting him from himself." I didn't gloat. I didn't lash out. I simply said, "Good. That's the only way he'll ever grow." Months later, Jason found steadier work. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that made him special. Just a paycheck that required him to wake up, show up, and do the job. My parents stopped bragging about him at family dinners. They stopped pretending. And slowly they started treating me differently. Not with fanfare, but with something that mattered: more respect. As for me, I didn't carry anger anymore. I carried boundaries. And in those boundaries, I finally found peace. Because the truth is, the golden child had fallen. But in the silence that followed, I rose. Not with applause, not with handouts, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had stepped out of the shadow, drawn the line, and never let it erase me again. And if Jason ever figures out how to stand on his own, that will be his story to tell. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. Sometimes the truth changes everything. See you in the next one.